can see you. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to chat them in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself tonight. My name is Jessica Likewise, and I wanted to share a little bit about why I'm qualified to help your family in the area of autism and ABA. So I have been an ABA therapist for more than 10 years now. I first studied special education when I was in college. I got a job. I loved ABA. I loved working with kids with autism. I went back. I got a master's in special ed. I went back and I got continuing education in applied behavior analysis as well. So most people who do ABA, there's a lot of turnover in the field. 75% of people quit within 10 years. So it's rare to find someone like myself who's been in the field for 10 years. And I've helped hundreds of families and online thousands of families to really achieve excellence in ABA, with ABA for their families, either with autism or any other related disability. So I'm going to jump right in tonight a little bit about what ABA is. So the technical definition of ABA is the applications of the principle of behavior to situations that are socially relevant for the purpose of creating meaningful change. It's a lot to say, it's a lot to take in. Even just, I've said the definition over and over and over, and then like I hear, wow, 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 wow. So, you know, it's really, I think, important that parents understand practically what it actually means, especially because ABA and in general, the history of special education has a dark cloud over it. So ABA is the mom definition. It's a way to get your kid to do stuff that you want them to do, and a way to get them to stop doing stuff that you don't want them to do. So really, you know, when you think about what ABA is, it's applied often to the field of autism, the field of special education, but it's also really used by companies to incentivize employees. It's used in the military, it's used by police officers, it's used in major corporations. So it's really just a way of promoting behaviors that you want to see. So let's go right into what ABA. Now, when we talk about ABA in the world of special education, we're typically talking about how it relates to teaching kids with autism, or really just any child who would benefit from learning individually, and a child who doesn't necessarily learn from the environment. So let's talk about some things that ABA can teach. So ABA can teach communication skills. So if you have a child who's not talking, maybe they're not using gestures, ABA is a way that you can teach that child to start talking, to start using language to communicate, or an alternative communication system. So play skills. A lot of times kids that, you know, they have a special needs, they have autism, they come right into, you know, they see a toy and they have no idea what to do with it. So you might start seeing them line things up, and it could be a sensory behavior or stimming behavior, but oftentimes the kids just don't have play skills. They don't really know intrinsically what to do when they see a toy. So ABA can be used to teach them how to play appropriately. Academic skills. You know, ABA is used all the time to teach things like science and math and social studies and reading. Now, that may not be the traditional route of thought of what ABA is, a discrete trial training approach. And when people think of ABA, they think of sitting at a table, they think of flashcards, of asking and answering the same questions over and over, but it doesn't really have to be that way. Social skills, you know, teaching children to say hi, to respond when someone greets them, to make eye contact, you know, having friendships, how to repair and maintain conversations, all those advanced level social skills, teaching children about emotions, how to read body language. You know, again, ABA can be used to taught all of these things. Daily living skills. A lot of times people think that just young children receive ABA. That's not true. Children who are older will often receive ABA, and they'll learn to do things like brush their teeth using ABA, how to make a bed, how to make a budget, life skills, job skills. I have a child right now who's interested in gardening. I put an ABA program together to teach him to do gardening. I have another child who's really interested in money, and he loves to, and you know, I'm teaching him to put a budget together, how to create an allowance, how to save money. So ABA can be used with lots and lots of things. The other thing that ABA now is starting to be used for is executive functioning skills. Now, executive functioning skills, and I want to first define what that is. An executive functioning skill is really the thought process that takes place in the brain that often as children are not even aware of, that takes place before behavior occurs. So things like inhibition control. So if child is walking through the grocery store and they're constantly touching things, right? That's an executive functioning skill, to be able to inhibit a behavior. Perspective taking skills. So if your child, you know, they don't necessarily intrinsically know that because they love chocolate donuts, donuts and that's their favorite snack, that you may not like that snack. Those are all executive functioning skills. Now, a lot of people will tell you, because you can't observe that you can't use ABA to teach it. I don't believe that's true. I believe you can use ABA to teach those skills. I've done it for many years, and I've seen children have a lot of success with it. So, and especially now with more modern science, behavior is always changing, education's always changing. Now that's something we know we can do. So you guys can see my dog in the background photobombing, but he always loves to jump on these webinars. All right, so communication skills, we talked a little bit about what those are, but I want to go really deep now and dive into what it is. So communication skills. A lot of times parents come to me and they say, okay, my child is not talking. Does that mean they have autism? Does it mean they need ABA? Can you help them? So communication, there's really two parts of communication. Number one is vocal language, and that's language that's spoken between two or more people. But also there's body language, gestures, pointing can be a type of communication. A lot of times parents will tell you the children take their hands and pull them to things. That's all type of communication. So a lot of times parents say, well, my child is not communicating. They may lack some communication skills, but often they have some other form of communication skills. So let's look at different types of communication skills. So making eye contact, again, gestures, alternative communication using devices like Proloquo, devices like PACS, sign language, picture systems, choice boards. These are all ways that children can be taught to communicate using ABA. So play skills. Now, play skills, it seems rather intuitive, right? That parents will just think, okay, well, my kid has a toy, they're gonna learn how to play with the toy. Well, there's a lot of play skills actually are tiered, and different play skills are appropriate at different levels. So a good ABA therapist will know how old a child is, what play skills they should have, what skills, and what order that the play skills develop in. So some types of play that it's important kids have, electronic play, we know that's really big nowadays. When parents are able to give their child an iPad, and they're able to, get something done, and it can make a really big difference. But if their child is sitting there and they're just pressing YouTube over and over and over and over, it may not be appropriate play. So teaching children to do some appropriate education apps can be really important. Independent play. Independent play is critical for children. If they don't have independent play, if they require someone else to play with them all the time, then parents, when they're trying to do something like fold the laundry or you have to make a phone call, they're not going to be able to manage their downtime, and they're going to wind up engaging in a lot of disruptive behavior. So independent play is really, really important. Musical play is a type of play. Imaginative play is really difficult, especially for a child. This is an advanced level play skill. Usually doesn't come between 3 and 5. For children who have special needs, children with autism, this can be a very difficult skill to teach, and a very difficult type of play, but it's one they have to be able to learn in the event they're going to be able to play with their peers, especially in a preschool setting. So the imaginative play that has to do with maybe going into the preschool kitchen and pretending to cook something. That's a type of doctor's kit is imaginative play. Functional pretend play is also another way to call that. So that can be really, really difficult. Now, cause and effect play, that's something that most babies start with, and that's really those toys where you press the button and it lights up or music happens. So that tends to be something that's a really good starting point. And then we have symbolic play. That again is really, really challenging for kids with autism. You see there a picture of the girl pretending that the banana is a phone. That's something that oftentimes in ABA you have to teach directly to children, because it can be really, really difficult. Children with autism are concrete thinkers, so to them it may be really challenging. Now there's other types of play as well. I didn't put everything in here: interactive play, social play, turn taking, all that play that involves two people. That's also another really important type of play. So play is really complex. So you might think, okay, well, I'm just going to buy my child a toy. Sometimes children really need to be taught these play skills. So a good ABA program will have all these play skills broken down, and they'll be working on teaching all of them that are appropriate for your child simultaneously. So here's again, we have other types of play I talked about, the interactive play, task completion play. That's another one that's really big. If your child is of the age of somewhere between 18 months and 5 years old, you want to make sure you have task completion toys. That'll teach them to complete an activity from start to finish. We talked a bit about pretend play. Gross motor play would be things like riding a bicycle, anything that involves really physical activity, playing ball, that's gross motor play. Constructive play, dramatic play. Constructive start to play is building things. Dramatic play would be acting things out. It's important that a child has all of these different play skills. So ABA is used to teach all of these different play skills. So academic skills, we went over that these are school-related skills, social skills. So these are just some things that ABA can teach: greeting, listening, sharing, personal space. That's really important. Oftentimes we know that kids with autism, they'll come right up to your face and say something. That can be really challenging for peers as kids get older, especially. Peers don't like it. Even in a preschool setting, if children are just sitting or touching too close to another person, it can be really, really difficult. So that's obviously something we need to work about. Friendship, maintaining friendship. That's something ABA can be used, can teach. Okay, so daily living skills, we went over, everybody knows what those are, right? The things that you do every day to make your life successful. And we went over that as well. Okay, so now we talked about what things ABA can teach. Now, ABA always has two components. One is a skill building program, which is going to teach all the skills we just talked about. The second thing is going to be a behavior reduction program, where you're starting to get into getting children to stop doing things you don't want them to do. Now, most times when parents are going to an ABA therapist, they're looking for a functional behavior assessment, this is the part that they really, really are most concerned about. Their children might be having tantrums, they might be aggressive, throwing things, injuring themselves, engaging in a lot of stimming behaviors that can really, really disrupt their everyday life, their learning, their ability to participate in activities. So this is usually a parent's biggest concern. And that's going to be my focus for this webinar. So now I wanted to just let you know, if you're on this webinar live, really what this webinar is. So this webinar, it was put together specifically for Clifton P.R.A.I.S.E. This is part of a 6-week course I'm going to be teaching later in the early 2019. I'm going to be teaching a 6-week course. This is going to be part of the first week of that course. At that point, it's going to be a 90-minute program. So what I'm giving you, and it's for free, is just a portion of that first week of the course. It's actually the part of the course I wrote. And there's going to be a special offer in the end where you can get access to that program to thank you for being on here and being part of this pilot program. As I teach this content for the first time, like I said, this is free for you. It's a gift for you. And it's also an opportunity for me to learn what is working and what's not working. So like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them while we're doing this class as well. So what I want you to really understand by the time we leave here today in this webinar is when we talk about changing a behavior using ABA, what we're actually talking about, what we mean by a behavior, and really the most important parts of how we're going to go about changing a behavior. And in ABA, we talk a lot about the function of behavior, so talking about why children are engaging in behavior. So that is my gift to you today. By the time we finish this webinar, you're going to be able to really know and understand how to identify why your child is engaging in the behaviors that he or she is engaging in, and it's going to help you really to come up with practical solutions for those behaviors. So in ABA, we talk about the word behavior all the time. So a lot of times when people think of behavior or behavioral, they always have a negative context to it. So, even as an ABA supervisor, so I'll go and supervise a program and I'll say, okay, well, how did they do today? They say, well, they had a lot of behaviors today. And, behavior itself is anything a person says or does. So a dead body test, right? That's the really test for behavior. If a corpse couldn't do it, it's a behavior. So talking is a behavior, moving a hand is a behavior, picking up your cell phone is a behavior, making a phone call is a behavior, heating up food in the microwave is a behavior, hitting someone's a behavior, waving hello is a behavior. Anything that a person does is a behavior. So when you're talking about changing a behavior, making a behavior more likely to occur, less likely to occur, a lot of times, people can be offended by ABA. ABA can be very controversial. People think, okay, well, why would you want to change a behavior? Why do you send your children to school to learn, right? So the ability to answer a multiplication problem or an addition problem, nobody would ever say, well, why would you do that? You're changing their behavior. Really, that's all ABA is. So a lot of people get hung up on that, and I wanted to make sure that it's really clear that a behavior is really just talking about a skill. So behavior and skill is often used interchangeably. And in the world of ABA, they're talking more now, they're shifting from using the word behavior, since it can have a negative connotation for parents, to teaching skills and to be working on skills rather than behaviors. But for the most part today, a lot of people still refer to it as a behavior, which is why that's what I'm calling it in this lesson and in this webinar. So that way, when you start hearing other people talking, if you're receiving an ABA program or you're reading other books, that's really what you're going to be hearing it called right now. So describing a behavior. Now, most times when parents talk about a behavior, they talk about what it looks like. That's called the typography of behavior. So for example, if I say to a parent, okay, well, what's your biggest concern? It's always going to say something to the effect of, well, my child is crying all the time. They go to the refrigerator, they cry. I don't know what they want. They'll say, okay, well, John doesn't play very nice with his brother. He's always hitting him. He's always throwing things. Or at the dinner table, the food's flying all over the floor. They're knocking the plate. I'm sure that some of these things sound familiar to people. So that's describing what the behavior looks like, the typography of the behavior. Now, it's important in an ABA program to have a clearly defined behavior so everybody knows, especially because in ABA we take data on the skills that children are learning. It's important to know what a behavior looks like and what you're calling a behavior. But in ABA, it matters a lot less what a behavior looks like than why is a child engaged in a behavior. Now, when you're thinking about changing a behavior, either building skills or teaching children to not do things you don't want to see, you really have to know why they're engaging in the behavior that they're engaging in. That's the critical part for ABA therapists. It's the absolute most important thing. So the function of behavior is always going to be the most important. And that's why really for the rest of the time that we're on here tonight, we're going to be really talking about the function of behavior, defining the function of a behavior, and figuring out what the function of a behavior is, because that is the key, the solution to really changing a behavior. Okay, so whenever a person engages in a behavior, it's always because of reinforcement. They want reinforcement. Reinforcement is really anything desirable. So basically, anytime someone's engaging in a behavior, it's to get something out of that, right? That's reinforcement. There are situations where that may not be true, typically with mental illness. We call them atypical functions of behavior. We're not going to talk about them here. They don't typically apply in this type of situation. Usually if someone has something like a dissociative identity personality disorder, multiple personality disorder, bipolar disorder, some of those things come into play. They don't typically come into play when working with children. Again, unless there's another diagnosis. Oppositional defiant disorder might be the only exception to times you really see that in childhood. But again, that's really a special case, special situation. So there are 4 main types of reinforcement. And that really means there's 4 real functions of behavior. One of them is broken into 2, so it'll be 5 functions of behavior. So the first one is social positive reinforcement. Now that sounds really complicated. All it really means is that a child is engaging in a behavior because either they want attention or they want someone to give them something. So the social part of it means that it relates to another person. So for example, going to mom and saying, "Mom, can I have gum?" That's a social positive reinforcement. Because they want mom to give them the gum. So if mom gives them the gum, the behavior is being reinforced in a social positive way. So really, you don't necessarily need to remember these technical terms, but the idea is they're doing it because they want something. That's really the part of this that becomes really important for parents. Wanting attention is another thing. So often we know, like, let's say maybe if this is something coming in, I have a child I'm working with now where mom has a new baby in the house. And now all of a sudden, mom's attention of this child is only 2. So they were the center of the entire universe. And now there's a baby. So mom's attention is divided. And so all of a sudden things are being thrown across the room. The food's being thrown on the floor, the toys are being thrown on the floor. He may be hitting mom, he's hitting his head on the floor, and he's doing all of these things to get mom's attention. Now that also is a social positive behavior. So a social negative behavior refers to a behavior that involves another person, but you're taking something away. So for example, if, let's say Jim, he's eating his dinner very nicely. He's sitting at the table and he's like, Mom, I'm finished. Can I get up? That's a social. If mom says yes, it's a social negative behavior. Or let's say, you're driving in the car with your spouse and your spouse says, hey, can you turn the music down? You turn the music down. It's a social negative behavior. Anytime anything's being taken away. So in ABA, giving a break can often be a reward, a social negative reinforcement. So if I say, okay, you know what, you have to work for 5 minutes and then you're going to get a break. That's social negative reinforcement. The work goes away when they do whatever it is that they're being asked to do. It can be as simple as today, I was working on mealtime behavior, working in a restaurant with the child, eating nicely. And I said, okay, you have to take 4 bites of chicken and then I'll tell them to take the food off the table. So that's social negative reinforcement. Now, automatic positive reinforcement and automatic negative reinforcement, it's similar in the sense that it, again, is you're adding something or taking something away. So in automatic positive reinforcement, it's an addition of a positive stimulus. It's really the same, but that's the technical definition. So you're getting something out of it. Let's say, for example, I live alone in my house. I go to my refrigerator, I take out my dinner and I put it in the microwave. That's automatic positive reinforcement. The behavior itself, it gave me what I wanted and it didn't rely on any other person. And then automatic negative reinforcement would be if the music was too loud in my own house and I got up and I'm sitting here and no one else is in the room and I lowered the radio, right? That's automatic negative reinforcement. They may seem like they don't come into play in the field of autism, in the field with kids. And for the most part, that can be true. Where that does come into play is with the sensory behaviors, where children are doing things like lining things up, whether either tactile behaviors where maybe they're pressing their arm against you or touching you, maybe they're playing with your ear or touching your nose, touching your glasses, taking your glasses off. Kids I know are often, they'll pull parents' hats off, pull glasses off. Those are all automatic behaviors. Now, it's more difficult to address automatic behaviors because it's difficult to know the function of the behavior. Now, if it's a automatic positive behavior, automatic negative behavior, you would deal with it a little bit differently, but because it's what's called a private event, we talked about that with executive functioning skills, it's not always clear why a child's doing it. So for example, sometimes children, when they get really upset, will bang their head. It's not necessarily clear whether they're doing it because of maybe they have the headache and it's making them feel better. Maybe they're getting something out of it. It can be really challenging to know the function of an automatic behavior. Some people talk about the fact that you couldn't work on them. And then, for me, my belief is you can work on them. You can actually treat them very similarly, but there's different approaches to it. Now, that's not something we're gonna learn tonight. That's something that I will be teaching in the 6-week course that I'm gonna be doing. So when we talk about changing a behavior, now how do you change a behavior? Really what we're doing is you break a behavior into 3 parts. So this is called the 3-term contingency. And this is part of everything we do in ABA. Every single behavior always will be broken down into 3 parts. Without the 3-term contingency, you cannot do ABA. If any part of this is missing, you are not doing ABA. So there are other instructional strategies, but so it's not that it's the only one. It's not like you're not engaging in a behavior, but in ABA, this is it's called the discrete trial. This is part of everything you do, whether you're at a table, whether you're playing basketball, whether you're shopping, whether you're working on a mealtime routine, whether you're teaching someone to brush their teeth, play a video game. This is built into everything. So the 3-term contingency, there's the antecedent. That's what happens before the behavior. There's the behavior itself, and then there's the consequence. So what determines a behavior is always going to be what happens before the behavior, and then what determines whether a behavior is going to happen again or not happen again is the consequence. So if a child accesses reinforcement as a result of the behavior, meaning if they get what they want as a result of the behavior, it's much more likely that that behavior is going to occur again in the future. If a child does not get what they want as a result of the behavior, it's much less likely the child's going to be engaging in what they want, engaging in the behavior again to get what they want because it didn't work, which is why knowing the function is so important. So we're going to really hone that in on that now. Okay, so I had to find it here. What happens before the behavior? The behavior itself is obviously what the person does. and the consequence is what happens after the behavior. So we're going to really work now on identifying some of the examples. Okay, so here's the first example. Lisa sees cookies on top of the refrigerator. She screams at the refrigerator until mom gives her a cookie. Right? This is something that probably happens every day in people's homes. And I go on to parents all the time, okay, well, what do you do when she's crying? Well, I give her a cookie because I know she wants it. So here we go. So let's practice here. What's the antecedent? So what happened before the behavior? Lisa saw the cookie, right? That's what happened before she started crying, which was the behavior. She screams, and the consequence was that she got the cookie. Okay, so now we know, right, that because Lisa got what she wanted, she's more likely to scream again in the future. Why? Because she learned this behavior works. Screaming is going to work to get me what I want. Screaming will get me the cookie. This is an example of social positive reinforcement. Lisa wanted a cookie. Lisa got the cookie because she was screaming. Mom gave her the cookie. And again, I'm not making, and if you're a parent on this and this sounds familiar, I'm not making anybody wrong about any of these things that they're doing. It's just really part of being a parent, right? Parents sometimes have to reinforce things. If you're on an important call, it's important that you, if you can't have your child in the background screaming, you give them the cookie, and then we move on, we deal with it later. But and now you guys, here's a perfect example right on here, and this is live, real, and raw, right? And I am not a parent, but I am a doggy parent. My dog came over here and he gave me the tennis ball and was growling at me. I'm sure you heard him shuffling around in the background. So I actually used a technique that we're going to be talking about later called extinction, planned ignoring. I did not acknowledge him in any capacity. The ball is on my lap. He might come back now that I'm holding it up. But I used ABA with my, to try to not give him the behavior again. So, so really it's just, and dealing with any behavior. So, raw and real, right? So your child may be tugging at you on the phone, and at the end of the day, this is really just what it comes down to, is what do we do to make it more less likely to happen or less likely to happen again? All right, so here's another example to practice. I think we missed our example. Here we go. All right, Susan asks her mom for gum. Her mom says no. Susan hits her head on the car window. Mom gives her gum so she will stop. Now, if I was driving and my child was hitting their head on the car window, I would probably also give them gum to get them to stop. So we're not making anyone wrong about this, but what happened? Susan's mom said she couldn't have gum. Susan hit her head against the window, and Susan got gum. So the next time that Susan wants gum, she's more likely to, again, hit her head against the window again. All right, so let's do number 3. Dad is on the phone. Ryan wants his attention, so he walks up to him and kicks him in the shin. Dad ignores him and walks away. Now, the other 2 examples I think most people could relate to. Most people probably could not relate to this example. If my child kicked me in the shin, I would want to do anything and everything but walk away. But let's look at what happened here. The antecedent, Dad was on the phone. The behavior, Ryan kicks Dad. The consequence, Dad walked away. Now, in this example, what Ryan wanted was that social positive reinforcement, the attention, right? Ryan wanted Dad's attention. And did Ryan get the attention when Dad walked away? He didn't. So even though as a parent, if I did that, I mean, first of all, if we did that when we were kids, most of us on this call, we probably wouldn't be alive today to even talk about it. But the truth is, in ABA, sometimes the talking about the consequence being functionally appropriate, being the right consequence for the function, may not always go with our intuition as to what seems like an appropriate response. In this example, this is the first example where actually Ryan didn't get what he wanted, and it's less likely the behavior was not reinforced by Dad ignoring and not responding to the behavior. So let's do another example. This again is something probably we can mostly relate to. Joe's watching television. Mom tells Joe it's time to eat dinner. Joe starts screaming and crying, throws the remote control. Mom is frustrated. She gives up and leaves the room. Obviously, Joe continues watching TV. So this was an escape behavior. So this is a type of behavior. And I'm giving you these functions. We're gonna go a little bit more in depth into the functions when I do the 6-week program. I'm really condensing all this information. So if it seems like it's moving really fast, it's because there's chunks that I took out in order to make it shorter to do for this webinar. But in this example, we see now that Joe was trying to escape eating dinner. He started screaming and crying, and he was able to escape eating dinner as a result of the screaming and crying. Right? Mom told Joe it was time for dinner. Joe, threw the remote, had a tantrum. Mom leaves the room. Joe gets to watch dinner. So again, his throwing behavior got him what he wanted. There was another example. Joe is watching television. Mom tells Joe that it's time to eat dinner. Joe asks Mom nicely for 5 more minutes. Mom agrees. Mom sets a timer. This is the ideal. This is what we wanted to go from this happening to this happening in every parent's home. In this place, Mom told Joe it's time for dinner. So this is an example of a child receiving ABA. He used all those skills we talked about teaching him. He asked nicely for 5 more minutes because he had those communication skills. And as a result, he got to watch TV for 5 more minutes. So this is what we want to work towards. In this example, in both prior examples, they're both about getting more television. Now, in the first example, the behavior we don't want to see was reinforced. In the second example, the behavior we do want to see was reinforced. Okay. So we talked about if we want to change a behavior, in simple terms, we really need to change what happens either before the behavior or after the behavior. So we have to make a behavior more likely to occur or less likely to occur. So now in this example, we saw examples where, parents maybe gave the cookie because Lisa was screaming at the refrigerator, she got a cookie. Susan was hitting her head against the car window, so she got the gum. Ryan threw the remote control, so he got to watch TV more. If we don't want to see them doing those things, we have to change the consequence, which means they really can't continue to get what they want as a result of those behaviors. Now, the antecedents, also, we have to make it more likely that they can engage in other behaviors. Now, oftentimes when children with special needs, especially kids with autism, when they're doing things like throwing things, hitting, when they're kicking, when Lisa's sitting at the refrigerator and screaming, it's not because, that's she wants to and she thinks it's fun. It's because she doesn't know how to say, Mom, can I please have a cookie? Right? That's what the antecedents are all about. It's about teaching, building skills, and really setting up the environment in a way that makes it more conducive for behaviors to occur that we want to see. So the biggest part of any ABA program is always going to be antecedents. This is really the teaching part. This is where the therapist comes into the house and teaches your child a whole bunch of really useful skills. So that way, when they want 5 more minutes, they ask for 5 more minutes. So this is really, really the critical part. This is the most important part of any behavior. Now, anytime that a behavior occurs, it's more likely to occur again. So if a tantrum occurs, you're more likely to occur again. So you want to prevent that tantrum from occurring. Now, there's things you can do that we say, okay, yes, we can put it through extinction. We can make it so they don't get what they want, and then not necessarily fully really make a huge risk it's going to happen again. But to some degree, every time a behavior occurs, to some degree, it's going to be reinforced. So teaching the skills ahead of time, it's number one, it's more pleasant for the parents, it's more pleasant for the child, it's more pleasant for the therapist, but it also really will prevent them from continuing to engage in those behaviors. All right, so antecedent modifications, that's what that's called. It's absolutely the most important part of it. So anytime, again, we're using antecedent modifications, part of it is really making a behavior more motivating. It's really things we're going to be doing, and there's so many intricacies. There's going to be an entire week devoted to antecedent modifications. So many things we can do, but again, sometimes moving things around the room, sometimes saving reinforcers for during therapy sessions are really good strategies, rotating toys to make them more fun to play with, teaching things like asking for breaks, teaching communication skills, developing a great communication system like using PECS or Proloquo. That can all be really important and part of it. Okay, so again, token systems, using choice boards, using a schedule. When parents tell me, okay, my child is having a difficult time leaving the house, the first thing I do is make sure they have some sort of visual to show a child where they're going. All these things are really, really important and really critical. Again, this is going to be an entire week devoted to this, so you're really just getting a snapshot of what it looks like. So what I do want to do, though, is go come up with some antecedent modifications and tell you what I would be doing. Now, if you are chatting in, for some reason, I don't seem to be able to see it. Let's see, here we go. For some reason on my screen, I'm not actually seeing the chat. I'm trying to open it and I can't see it. So if you are chatting in, I will get back to you. If you asked questions, I will get back to you and answer them all. Unfortunately, if you're chatting in answers to these, when I'm giving you the hypotheticals, I cannot see them. But I do promise if you chatted in, it will see, even though it's not working right now, I'll get the chat log when I end the recording, and I will make sure I answer all of your questions. So I'm going to give you some examples, since I can't do this interactively, since the chat's not working. I will give you examples of some things as a therapist I would do if I came into a house and parents were doing, this is what was going on in a home. All right, so Lisa sees cookies on the top of the refrigerator. She screams at the refrigerator until mom gives her a cookie. Now, if I came into the house and I'm a therapist, mom hires me and says, okay, you know, I don't know what to do. The first thing I would do would be to make sure Lisa has a way of requesting a cookie without screaming. So for example, I might get a picture of a cookie and I might put it on the refrigerator. I might get a voice, one of those little voice boxes that you put in stuffed bears, like stuffed animals. You can program it so that way when she presses it, it says cookie. I might set up a PEC system so she can use pictures to request different things. If depending on the age, you might move that to Proloco on the iPad. So my biggest thing for this would be some skill building repertoire, giving her ways to actually functionally ask for cookie. So that's going to be, right, an antecedent modification. That's going to be really important. So that's something we can do right off the bat, is making sure that Lisa has a way to ask for it appropriately. If she has a way to ask for it that's appropriate, she's not going to do this, right? It's not fun for a child to scream. And so a lot of times, you know, parents have to remember that your child doesn't want to have a tantrum. They don't want to scream. It's not pleasant. It's not fun. It's because they're frustrated. They can't communicate. So giving them a way to communicate is really going to be the most important first part of it. Okay, so number 2, Susan asks her mom for gum. Her mom says no. She hits her head on the car window. Mom gives her gum, so she'll stop. You know, what I would say right off the bat, number 1, if they're hitting their head on the window, making sure that there's a safety concern. So I might even say to the parent, look, we're gonna have to make sure there's a pillow behind her. We're putting a pillow up, putting up some sort of fabric. So if that's something that's happening all the time, let's make sure she can't do that. And making sure she has something to occupy her. It seems so simple, but it really makes sense. You might be on the go and not thinking about the fact that simply having her favorite snack with her, if this is a habit, might make it easier. Making the iPad, putting a DVD if your car has that feature. I mean, I don't know that DVDs seem to be outdated nowadays, but making sure, you know, she has something, the phone, the iPad, something to occupy her favorite toy, making sure that she's occupied will make it less likely that's going to happen. And in some of these things, they seem so simple, but when you're on the go all the time and you're running things around, it's not always easy to think about it or remember it. But those little tiny changes can be life-altering for families if we can get those behaviors to stop. You know, I had one parent who came to me and they wanted some advice. There was a friend of mine. They wanted advice with potty training. Her child had a diagnosis of autism. They had 3 different programs going on. They had tons of people in the house. The kid was going to be 4. It was a problem. He had to start school. He had to get potty trained. They had like 2 weeks left, or he wasn't going to be able to go to their private preschool. She was beside herself. She didn't know what to do. And I'm like, okay, look, we're going to make one small change. We're going to give him the iPad while he's sitting on the bathroom. He potty trained in 48 hours with that one simple change when they had literally a year and a half of no success. So sometimes one simple thing that you do just takes an outsider coming in and say, let's just try making this one small change. It can make all the difference for your family. Okay, so here in this example, you know, obviously we still want antecedent modifications. We want to give Ryan an appropriate way of asking for dad's attention. In this case, we said, okay, the behavior wasn't reinforced. Obviously, we don't want Ryan to go around kicking people. We don't want him to do that, right? So giving Ryan a way of asking for attention. So, you know, not tapping on his shoulder, tapping on dad's shoulder to show him he wants attention. Or if dad is going to be unavailable, and let's say that you're a parent that you work from home, you know, like myself, and, you know, maybe on mom's office door, there's a like welcome sign or open or close, or we say like we put a red happy face and a green happy face, meaning come in, or a red unhappy face, meaning you can't come in. So I have had that situation, and, you know, kids get it, kids understand it. So, you know, I've taught many times their child's maybe 3 or 4, they have maybe high functioning autism, and they burst into mom's room and mom's on a conference call teaching them, okay, you can come in when there's a green, you can't come in when it's red. So some little simple antecedent modifications like that, again, can really be crucial and be critical in helping a child be successful. So the number 4, we told, Joe is screaming, he's crying, teaching Joe to ask for 5 more minutes, right? We saw in the example 5 exactly how that worked when Joe knew how to ask for 5 minutes and he was willing to do that. So we're also on this one a transitional warning. If Joe normally has an issue, just, if your child typically has an issue with transitions, a picture schedule is amazing. And you can literally just get a piece of paper and, you can just draw it out. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. You literally have your child, okay, look, first, all right, Joe, we're gonna have TV, and then I'm a terrible artist, and I still have bunny ears on my television. So I don't have cable. So we have bunny ears. But okay, first we're going to do TV, and then we're going to eat dinner. I'm drawing an apple because I'm terrible at art, and that's about the only thing I can draw. And then after that, we're going to brush our teeth, right? That little simple picture schedule will make Joe aware ahead of time that the TV is going to go off, and that's what's going to happen. It's going to make him much less likely to protest, especially let's say you have a warning, a timer. Okay, we're going to watch TV for 20 minutes. Again, it seems like a really small change, and I know as a parent you have a million things going on, but if this is the difference between Joe screaming and Joe coming to eat dinner nicely, then ultimately it's really going to make a big difference in your life. It's going to be worth that extra effort and really that extra thought going into it. So number 5, this obviously we don't really need an antecedent modification here. Here the antecedent modification was Joe was taught to ask for more time. So. All right, so now we have the A, the B, the C. We talked about really now the A, which is figuring out why a child's engaging in a behavior, what you can do to make it more or less likely for that to happen or not to happen. We figured out the behaviors, what the child doing. The consequence really is taking a look at now how you're going to respond as a parent to what a child does. I'm not going to have time to teach all of this. We can go through it quickly. But anytime a behavior is reinforced, the consequence is desirable. It's called reinforcement. So if a behavior is reinforced, it's going to happen again. We talked about this over and over and over and over. We already talked about, like, in the example, Susan was hitting her head. Her behavior was reinforced because she got the gum. Lisa was screaming at the refrigerator. Her behavior was reinforced because he got the cookie. Now, in the example with Ryan kicking Dad in the shin, behavior was not reinforced because Dad walked away. He didn't give Ryan attention for that behavior. So it may seem, okay, well, didn't make sense, but the behavior wasn't reinforced in that example. So it can be a good thing that a behavior is reinforced, as we saw when, for example, Joe asked for 5 more minutes for TV. That was reinforced. That was a good thing, but it was not a good thing when Susan's behavior of hitting her head on the car window was reinforced. So, we talked about this already, right? We don't want Lisa to get the cookie because she's screaming. We don't want Susan to get the gum because she's hitting her head on the window. We didn't want Joe to get the TV because he was throwing things. But we do want Joe to get the TV if he asks nicely for things. So really knowing how to respond to behavior is absolutely the most important thing. If a behavior is not reinforced, it is less likely to occur again. I've said it over and over and over because it's just so important. And when a behaviorist will tell you as a parent, look, if Ryan kicks you in the shin, walk away. And you're like, what you really wanted to do is like, right, what our parents would have done to us and like smacked him in the head, right? That's what would have happened if we were kids and we did that. But the bottom line is, if you're giving them attention, even if it's negative attention, even if it's like, Ryan, stop that, go to your room, or stop that right now, Mom's on the phone. You're giving him the attention that he's looking for by engaging in the behavior. So sometimes as a behaviorist, we say, okay, do this. It may not seem to make sense, but usually there's really good science behind it. All right, so this is the homework you have from this webinar. I want you to write out 3 behaviors your child engages in that you would like him or her to stop doing, and try to identify the function of those behaviors. I am going to send you out a recording of this webinar. If you reply to me with your homework done, I will tell you whether or not you are correct, which means you're essentially getting free coaching and a free behavior assessment from me. I charge, my rates actually they're listed at $90 an hour on my website. They're actually going to be raised to $150 in January of 2019. If you do this, I will spend the time to read your assignment. You are going to get a free coaching session, essentially virtually. I will reply to your email and let you know. So if you're having a situation right now where you're not really too sure why your child, Sam, is tantruming every time he puts his shoes on, if you show me and you tell me, okay, this is what's happening before Sam starts tantruming, this is what he's doing, and this is what I'm doing about it. If you try to figure out, I will actually come, I will do your homework, I will help you with your homework, and I will tell you whether or not you were correct, and we can come up with some strategies together. I will also include some strategies in that on how to help your child. So I'm going to do that just for the people who have the access to this webinar. The other thing I wanted to offer you as a result of being on this webinar, I was very upfront from the beginning, and as I taught this, I saw some things in my presentation that worked, some things I do want to go back and change. This is the first time I'm teaching this. This is going to be part of a 6-week course I'm going to be doing on Parents' Introduction to ABA. I'm going to be selling that course at $200. It'll include a digital copy of my book, A Parent's Introduction to ABA. If you want to learn more about ABA between now and then, when I send out the recording of this presentation, I will include a link where you have the option to purchase my book for $20. If you do that within 48 hours, if you buy the book for $20, I will give you that 6-week course for free to thank you for being on here and really allowing me to pilot this program for you. By the time you get on that program, it's going to be a lot more comprehensive. This was really a small snapshot of what it will cover. It'll be a 6-week course, and it's going to be built in a really big way. It'll be very interactive. During that course, you'll also have access to a 6-week a coaching group where I'm going to be doing a secret Facebook group that only people in the course will have access to, where parents will be able to help each other. But I will also be in there for 6 weeks doing coaching, free coaching for anyone taking the course. If you're putting in you'll get homework every week, and then I will help you and guide you through your homework and help you with real examples of what's going on in your home. So you'll have access to me as a therapist with over 10 years of experience during those 6 weeks. That alone is worth the $200, or really that alone is worth more than $200. But at the time I'm going to be selling that for $200, there's no obligation to buy anything. You simply can get this recording, watch it again, share it with a friend or not, and but if you want to, if you do decide to buy the digital copy of my book, I will give you the course for free. So within 48 hours from now, you're going to get a recording of this webinar. I'm going to do my best to send it out by tomorrow. If not tomorrow, certainly by Friday morning, I will send out a recording of this webinar, recording of your homework. Again, there'll be a link. If you purchase the book, you'll get the course for free. If you decide you don't want to, then you don't have to. And again, if you reply to that email with your homework and just simply reply to the email that I send you the recording from, I will help you to work through some of the issues that are going on in your family right now. So thank you so much for being part of this webinar. I hope that everyone enjoyed it. Make it an amazing evening, and I really hope to see everybody again soon. Take care.